Hi, everybody. Welcome to my first podcast episode. I'm so excited for this. I have been a guest on so many podcasts, and I just knew it was time to start my own. So, thank you so much for joining me for this first time. And at the time of this recording, I'm currently snowed in here in Columbus, Ohio. We got 4 to 5 inches of snow last night. So, it's the perfect day to hunker down and record some podcast episodes. So, I wanted to start today with my story. I am a registered dietitian, and my practice, Nourished by Taylor, focuses on helping women safely transition off birth control and get to the root causes of frustrating symptoms like acne, period problems, so missing, irregular, painful periods, and mood swings, a ton of different things that a lot of women experience and are put on birth control pill to quote unquote help. And a lot of women who come off birth control have a really terrible time with it. So this is all fueled from my own personal passion and my own personal story of my birth control journey and history. So that's what I wanted to start this whole podcast about, because it's really the reason why I opened my practice and the reason that I do exactly what I do today to help other women not have to go through what I did. So transforming, going back in time a bit, I was put on hormonal birth control when I was 18 after losing my period. And my doctor didn't ask any questions, didn't do any deeper digging to uncover why my period was missing. He just basically was like, okay, just go on birth control and that'll give you your period and you can stay on that until you want to come off. And since I was 18, I was going off to college and it was assumed that I'd be sexually active in college. I actually was not. So there were a lot of assumptions made and a lot of misinformation, but I didn't know any better. I was like, great, I can take this pill. All my problems are solved. My mom also, wasn't aware at that time that, you actually are ovulating on the pill. So we both just thought, great, this is a solution for the problem of my period missing. What nobody knew was that behind the scenes, I was meticulously counting calories. I was over exercising. I would pretty much exercise every single day and had a really difficult time taking rest days. And sometimes I'd exercise for hours. And I was obsessed with being the healthiest I could be, air quotes, healthiest I could be. So, what was really happening is I was struggling with an undiagnosed eating disorder. So, this is why I lost my period, because my body was malnourished. It was stressed to the max. I wasn't taking care of myself. And so, my body basically shut down. And your period is one of the first things that tend to go when your hormones are struggling and when you're malnourished as a female. So, that was why I was losing my period, but my doctor didn't recognize that. So, thankfully, I was able to heal my own relationship with food, exercise, and my body. It took a lot of work. I didn't receive any formal treatment for an eating disorder, but I know I had that because I went on to become an eating disorder dietitian after I had healed my own relationship with food. I can definitely dive deeper into that in another episode about my eating recovery journey. But I was so passionate about helping women and men recover from eating disorders and, similar to this experience, not have to go through what I did. So, as you can see, I am someone, I've always been lucky enough to have jobs that I've been really passionate about. I keep using that word, but it's so true. And that I've been really excited for, and that have really fueled, my expertise and what I love to do. So I worked for quite a long time in the field of eating disorders. And I actually thought that's where I was going to stay. I thought this is my calling. This is something I'm so excited about and love doing. And it wasn't until I was 28 years old. So we're moving forward to 28 years old. So I was put on birth control at 18. Now, 10 years later, I was on my way to get takeout food. I was driving to Westerville, Ohio. I live in Dublin, Ohio, for anyone who's local. So it's about a good 25-minute drive. And so I put on a random podcast as I was driving to get takeout food. And the podcast was featuring a guest. Her name is Alyssa Vitti. And she wrote tons and tons of really great books, one of them being the first ever book I read about birth control that I highly recommend, called In the Flow. And she was talking all about the negative consequences and the negative impacts of being on birth control and that birth control has on the body. And my mind was absolutely blown. Here I was with a master's degree in nutrition, very health aware, health conscious, helping other people improve their health. And I had no clue what was going on in my own body. And the biggest kicker was when she talked about how you're not actually having a real period on birth control, whether it's the pill or the IUD. And that just shocked me because here I thought I was having a true period on the pill for the past 10 years. And that was the reason I was put on birth control in the first place. So I decided after I read her book, kind of thought about options, and I made the personal decision to stop birth control cold turkey. I didn't know any other way to do it. And when I went to my doctor and talked to her about, I had a new doctor here. And when I talked to her about my decision, she was like, okay, just like stop and see what happens and like come back if you experience any problems. So I did. And as you will learn as you continue listening, that is not a great decision, but that is what most women are told, unfortunately. So at first, everything was fine. And then about, I want to say 3 to 4 months later, I started experiencing what's called post-birth control syndrome symptoms. So terrible breakouts. I had always struggled with acne, ever since my teenage years. My mom struggled with it, my sister. It was just kind of one of those things like we thought it was just genetic. But my acne came back with a vengeance because birth control did help it a little bit. But I was also doing other band-aid medications like spironolactone, tretinoin, things like that to help it. But it was the worst it had ever been after I stopped birth control. My anxiety was through the roof. I'd always been more of an anxious type A personality, but it was uncontrollable and just really irrational when I stopped birth control. And I had irregular periods. And that was one of the biggest reasons I wanted to come off birth control was because I wanted to make for sure I was healthy enough to get a true period because I had done a lot of work, like I mentioned, to heal my relationship with food and exercise. And so I wanted to make for sure I'm at a healthy weight for my body. I'm making sure I'm eating enough. I'm nourishing myself. And so that was really the driver that made me make that decision in addition to everything else I knew. So my periods were irregular. I did get my period back right away, but they were anovulatory. I wasn't actually ovulating on them and they weren't really consistent. So with all these problems, I went to my medical team. So I went to my doctor, my dermatologist, and they really offered no support. My doctor was like, well, just kind of, that's normal. Just like continue waiting and seeing what happens. Bye. And then my dermatologist, we tried, a higher dose of spironolactone. We tried different topicals. I went and got facials. I got peels. I spent so much money trying to fix my acne. That's another episode I want to talk about is like, it's probably going to make me feel physically ill once I break it down. But I think it's important how much money I spent on trying to fix my acne from like just a topical outside perspective when really if you have consistent acne and persistent acne, consistent and persistent, and it's not responding to just topical procedures alone, it's a sign that something much deeper is going on, which is the case for a lot of women who suffer with acne. So I did all those things, and basically at the end, my dermatologist was like, "Well, your only other options." Oh, I also did antibiotics too, which I was kind of against because I was learning more about gut health and how that actually can make your gut health worse. But I was desperate. So I did those too. And so when I really wasn't responding to any of the things that she suggested, my dermatologist said, well, sometime you might just have to go back on the pill. And it was that, or she said the last thing we could try is Accutane. And I knew I did not want to do that just with all of the negative health consequences of it, long-term repercussions. I left that appointment crying, so frustrated, so hopeless, so unsupported, being like, well, what else am I supposed to do? I know going back on birth control isn't the answer. I knew that added fuel to the fire of these problems I'm experiencing, but I don't know what else to do. I was miserable. So at the time, this was like the lowest of the lows, and it actually was a high of a high because it was the turning point I needed to take my health into my own hands and to figure out how to heal my body naturally without relying on birth control, without relying on band-aid medications. So I really shift gears and pursued functional nutrition training. I paid for specific nutrition mentorship from an acne uh, functional dietitian and got ongoing support and clinical education in that because I was very conventionally trained. So very much so functional, just as a brief overview, is very root cause oriented of why is this happening versus conventional, it's kind of like the aftermath of what do you do to stop it. So if someone has, like I'll just use my example, if someone has a missing period, it's like go on birth control. It's like that will fix your missing period, quote unquote, but it doesn't. Versus functional is more, okay, well, why is your period missing to begin with? So I learned all about that, and it was so amazing, and it just really shifted my perception of health even more. And I figured out the secrets to healing my body from the inside out and how to heal my body or how to heal my acne naturally, how to balance my moods. My period was more consistent and it came back and it's regular. And now it's, you know, this was, so I just turned 20, or I just turned 33. So at 28, I started all of this, just thinking through the timeline. So really, this was last year that I started pursuing the functional nutrition and education and mentorship. But prior to that, I had struggled for about, that would have been like 3 to 4 years that I struggled figuring out my post birth control syndrome without any support. So it was really a transformative experience. And that is what led me to switch my career path and my passion. Not that it dwindled from eating disorders. I'm still very passionate about helping people, improve their relationship with food and their bodies and exercise. Very, very passionate. Still a firm believer in health at every size and an anti-diet approach. And that inspired my business name of Nourished by Taylor, because I want to focus on nourishment versus restriction, which is what a lot of people think that dietitians do, is what you can't eat, good food, bad food. That is absolutely not what I do at all. It's very different. So I switched career paths and ended up opening up my private practice to specifically help women transition off birth control in a safe way so they don't have all those symptoms and get to the root cause of what's causing their hormone symptoms to begin with. So that is why I created my business. That's why I created this podcast, to get more information out there. And that's pretty much my story. And that's how I ended up here. It's been a whirlwind and it's been lots of ups and downs. And I can honestly say it's been so amazing too, to help the women that I have had the pleasure of helping so far. And I can't wait for what this year brings and what the rest of my career brings. So each week I'll be dropping a new episode on Mondays. And if you're excited to dive more into this, if you're like, wow, my mind is already blown, just like yours was when you heard that podcast you heard 4 years ago or 5 years ago at this point, then I'll drop the link to my free Break Up with Birth Control Masterclass. This is perfect for the woman who for sure wants to stop birth control, but is terrified of experiencing nasty symptoms like painful periods, missing periods, acne, mood swings, all of that not fun stuff. It's also for the woman who's maybe curious, like you maybe listen to this episode and are like, wow, I also didn't know that I wasn't having a period on birth control, or I was told this by my doctor, but you're saying this opposite thing. So it's a great first place to start learning more about birth control and its impacts on the body. And even if you don't want to transition off, that's totally fine. And I also want to take this opportunity to say that I am not against birth control. I think it is a very personalized decision that we are lucky to have, and I think it should stay that way. I am against non-informed consent, though. I do think that doctors need to be more educated on birth control themselves and therefore educate women about its negative impacts and about how birth control actually works so that women can make an informed decision themselves. And I think that our medical system is failing women in the fact that it just provides us a lot of times the option of birth control or suffering with those symptoms versus digging deeper into why are those things happening, whether it's a missing period like me, whether it's painful periods, whether it's PCOS, whether it's, I call it birth control roulette, where you're bouncing from birth control to birth control, trying to see what works, and you're just not responding and you're having a horrible experience on them. So I think that's really the message I want to convey right up front is I'm not against birth control. I think it's a good decision that women have to make. I just want women to be more educated and informed on it so that they can make the decision that's best for them. So anyways, in that Break Up with Birth Control Masterclass, that's who it's for. And I detail my 4 steps to breaking up with birth control symptom-free with clear skin, 0 mood swings, pain-free monthly periods, and it's a really great starting point to learn more. So that is in the show notes. And to finish off all my episodes, I'm going to be either answering this myself or eventually when I have guests on, asking them to answer this and maybe also answering myself. But because I mentioned I'm all about nourishing your body, not restricting it. My ending question is always going to be, how am I nourishing myself? Mentally, emotionally, physically. This doesn't just have to be with food, with exercise, again, things that tend to be more diet culture focused, but it could also be, how are you nourishing yourselves in a non-physical way? So the way that I've been nourishing myself recently is actually yesterday is a good example because I am currently on my period and I am usually my periods are very symptom free, which is awesome. And they can be for you too. That's a lot of the work that I do. And you still will have natural ebbs and flows of your hormones. And so your hormones are at their lowest level during your period, which is why you feel more tired, more maybe want to isolate a little bit more, be less social. That's when you do like lower impact workouts or you nap instead of working out. But anyways, I'm at the height of my period. So I yesterday had this long to-do list of things I wanted to get done. It was Sunday and I pretty much accomplished most of them, but then I had cleaning on the list. And I love to clean on Sundays just to get the house clean. It makes me feel like set up and ready for the week. And it's just kind of like a routine. But I got to about 3 p.m. and I was like, I am so tired. I just don't want to clean. And I didn't force myself to do it. Instead, I plopped myself on the couch, got cozy, and watched an episode of Real Housewives of New York. And it was great. And I just said, it's fine. That's a huge win for me in general because given my type A personality, one thing I've really been working on for the past couple of years is resting more and viewing rest as productive. So the fact that I scrapped that from my to-do list and I was listening to my body and understanding that at that point in time, the best thing I could do for myself was to rest and not clean and not finish my to-do list, that's a huge win for me. And that's how I nourished my body yesterday. So that's it for today's episode. If you found this helpful, please, please, please like, subscribe. It really helps grow the show, especially as a newer podcast. I would really appreciate it. And if you have any girlfriends, family members, colleagues who would benefit, please share it with them as well. I really want as many women as possible to get access to this and as many eyes on it as possible so women can hear this really valuable information and have the information that they need to heal themselves and to feel better. So until next time, stay nourished.